I wanted to say congratulations, really, on such a great film. I really, really enjoyed it. I watched it again last night, and slightly different experience the second time, I must say. But the first thing I really noticed was that you wrote, directed, edited, and produced this film. Was that something that you would choose to do, or was that a function of budget?
I think it was yeah, function of budget, not for editing, but the producing part. It's a matter of budget because and a matter of the fact that there's not many producers in Peru, and um yeah, because not there's not many producers that would jump in a project to try to fund it, right? Like you can find more directors of production, we call them here, like line producers, right?
Right.
But so people who are hired by production companies to work, but not people who look for funds, because that's time consuming and obviously like it's tough, right? But yeah, so that's why I took I took it on my hands. I had interest from a company in New York that wanted to do the job for me, but they were not really pushing hard, I think. So I didn't continue with them for after like 2 years of just waiting
Wow.
for
Yeah.
them. And also they were giving me a contract where I was losing everything, all the rights, and I wasn't getting paid for my work, for rewrites or anything. So it was like, yeah, we'll take everything. You should be happy because we produce it, but you won't get any money at all at any moment. So I was like, well, no, this is, and it's not like they were really doing it. So I just decided to start my own company in Peru and apply for government funds and just learn how to fundraise basically.
Right. I think if I was going to make a film, I'd be happy not to do the fundraising, but I kind of imagine that
Don't worry.
I would want to do I would want to write my own film, and I'd probably want to edit it if I could do it. So actually
Okay.
the writing, the directing and editing seem really important. But would you give any of those up if you could? What's the most important thing in the process for you?
Well, I think the whole thing is important, even the producing part, because everything means that all of that means that you have control over things, right?
Hmm.
That's the thing, um, if I could just direct and I had to give up screenwriting and editing, I could do it. But not until this point, I haven't been able to not edit. Like every little thing I do, I've done like before this film. Like I always have to edit a little bit. It's weird. I think it's like, I guess, designing where you can like and suggest things, and but it's only when you do it that ideas come to you.
Hmm.
um
I had a question about the film's design, if you don't mind, Melina. So one of the things that's most impressive about the film is how unified it feels. So, for example, Georgina's her physical and emotional separation from her daughter is often emphasized by the way she's placed in the frame at a distance. And likewise, Pedro's kind of enforced restraint, if you like, is symbolized by his placing in the frame. Most strikingly, that scene where he has to break up with his boyfriend and the camera is placed way back from him. He's almost lost in the frame. And so throughout the film, the way it's shot and framed, and these kind of subdued performances, everything builds towards the overarching themes of the film. And I wonder at what point in the process do you start designing the film in that way? Are you making those decisions as you're writing it, or does it kind of organically develop as you make the film?
I think it was more organic as the process will continue. I like that way of filming things, where you can, where the context of the person, the architecture or the landscape speaks to you about the emotional situation or the some idea like colonialism, like just the difficulty of life, like but we weren't that courageous to shoot everything like that, right? Like, for example, that shot you're talking about, we had a closer one.
Yeah.
We liked it. We said with Inti, oh my God, this is it. We really liked it. Because it's the same sound. We didn't dub any. That's what you saw is what we got. And to listen to it from far away, we really liked it. But when we weren't that courageous, we went downstairs and shot a dolly, and then it was not, many things, you know. In the film we got rid of, and they were okay shots, but we thought this was the most striking, I guess, the most best way to express separation.
I agree. Yeah, there's another moment in the film that struck me as equally bold, and it's the moment in the film where we realize almost in passing that some of the people who have been committing these crimes have been found guilty and prosecuted, but you choose to kind of almost skip over a moment in a more conventional film would be much closer in focus. And I wonder if it felt kind of risky collapsing the beats of a more conventional narrative, although it seemed entirely appropriate because, of course, your central character doesn't get any sense of resolution through this. So it was right. It was a right decision, I think, not to trace a more conventional trajectory and have this triumphant moment where people are brought to justice and all the rest of it. But did that too feel a bit risky when you were making it?
That totally felt risky. Yeah, we had planned actually to see the TV, to see them on that TV, but then it was Cinti's idea. He said, actually, you know what, because we were already prepping for that, doing all the production of who's gonna be the actor, you know, the whole thing. And he said, you know what, how about if the camera turns away and we just listen? And I liked it. I thought, yeah, actually it's not, if you think about it, it's not really important that we see them. No. As so many things in the film, and you can just listen to it and it'll be information, but emotionally you are in a different place. What we're trying to say is that this doesn't mean anything for her. That's great that they found them, but what is required from now for her, it's for the government to take action, to start a huge investigation to bring the babies back, and that's not going to happen. So that's where we should be, instead of like celebrating the capture of this mafia.
Yeah, that comes across really clearly. And that's Inti you mentioned, that's Inti Briones, your DOP?
Yeah.
Have you worked together before?
We did a short film before, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the film's design and the photography is pretty extraordinary.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It was you know, he grew up in Peru. He's Peruvian. He grew up in the 80s like me. He's a bit older, but there was nothing. There was no film community here. So he and he has Chilean family. Half of his family is from Chile, so he made his career there. He left Peru when he was young, like 19, I think.
Okay.
But he's from here, so a lot of the photography was just memories, painful, very painful memories for us, because his family was very political, and like that brought them a lot of problems in those days. So yeah, it was a matter of more than designing shots. It was a matter of, with him, we remember things and what this film meant for us, and which watched other films and discuss what we like, what we didn't like, what we thought it would work. First, we discussed. He was thinking of getting this machine called Movie, which is something like Steadicam. And I said, I don't know why, but I don't think that's gonna work. I just usually I don't like that. Somehow I just don't see this. So he's like, oh, how about dollies? And then I thought, yeah, this, if we are to move the camera at some point, then this seems better. So we discussed little things like this, and then it was more to get into that mood of remembering and basically just trying to capture what the reality was bringing to us.
Did
Like with
you
the
did
films.
did you always know that the film was going to be in black and white when you first started thinking about it?
Yes, we decided that very early on when I dropped that company I was telling you about in New York. Uh, when I Because they were saying, "Oh no, let's do it in color." In those days, they were afraid of black and white. Um, and then I said, "Well, if I'm gonna take the trouble to do everything myself, I'll just do it the way I want to do it." That's one example of freedom.
The freedom.
Yes, so I said, I think black and white is suitable, and that's one advantage of
Mm.
you can just decide that. So very early on, at the moment I dropped that company that wanted to shoot in color and then decide if we were gonna turn it into black and white, I said no, this is gonna be black and white, and from the very it's native black and white. We bought a red camera that is monochrome that allows you to you get a better range of grays, put it that way, because the sensors uh, are working without the filters for color. So what that gives you, it's also the capacity to shoot in with very low light. So yeah, but there's no color at all in the film.
It's hard to imagine this film being in color. Actually, it feels like it has to be in black and white, but I guess that's the sign of a good film, isn't it? When you watch it and you feel like it couldn't be any other way.
Yeah, thanks. Um, yeah, I think so, because it's coming from the news, and the news in those days, in the newspapers, were uh, in black and white. So I guess that has something to do with that. Our memory of all the major events of the 80s are black and white.
Right.
Um, and it's really ingrained for me because I'm the daughter of a journalist. So it felt like that.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if there is a better way to portray that feeling of hopelessness and
Mm.
just gray and sadness.
But it also lends itself to, it's at once both, yeah, it does convey a real sadness and also a kind of it gives it a kind of period feel, but at the same time the black and white, I feel, sort of lends itself to an almost mythical dreamlike quality. Was that in your mind as well?
Dream.
One of the films I kept thinking about was that Embrace the Serpent from a few years ago, and it had a similar kind of tone, your film, to that.
Yes, Yes, I definitely dreamlike was in my mind. Between dreamlike and nightmarish, right? That definitely I wanted to add, and I thought, yeah, the black and white was gonna help us. But more than that, I think black and white was gonna help us to make the film in a way more philosophical,
Yeah.
less like everything else. I thought should feel very authentic. The people, the buildings, everything. And I tried to make as authentic as possible. We took a long time in post production so that we could, you know, be accurate with the time period. We had to erase a lot of things, cables and internet things, and but on the other hand, I thought it needs a balance. It can't be an illustration of life. It needs to ask questions in order to be something that could interest everybody. And I think black and white, because it's graphic in a way, makes the things graphic, allows you to ask these sort of philosophical questions with images, you know, because it's like it allows you to talk in a more obvious way, if you want, the about darkness and light and all these transits.
Yeah.
Is one thing I thought was really interesting about watching it a second time was the first time I just appreciated the film aesthetically so much. And I did think, God, what a tragic story at the end of it. So it wasn't like I hadn't seen it as a tragedy. But I enjoyed the aesthetics of the film so much the first time. Watching it the second time, because I knew what to expect aesthetically, I still enjoyed it, but actually I was more engaged with the politics and the emotion of the film. And I actually felt it, I think I described it as a thriller. The first time around, it felt worse than a thriller. It felt almost, like a horror film. I really felt the brutality of it yesterday. And I don't know, is when you're making a film like that, do you really think about the balance of the political message, which obviously is the motivation for making the film, against, how much aesthetic kind of poetry you put into it?
Yeah, I think that's the job. That's the job for the director, I think, to balance, because I think it's really very quickly anybody can identify this story as something that needs to be told, and obviously, I mean, it's human trafficking, and the traffic thing it's babies, so it's perhaps the worst, right? Like the worst thing we can do as humans. But yeah, then it's gotta become a work of art, a film, whatever you want to see it, the way you want to see it. But so that's where a filmmaker comes in, right? Like we could all say, wow, this is material for a film, this needs to be told. But okay, how do we do it in a way that's not just a matter of telling this exactly how it happened? And a lot of things have to come into play. Why am I telling this story? Is it going to be like a memory? It's going to be more like I'm going to try to make it as realistic as possible. It's going to be fast. It's going to be like, I'm thinking of White Tiger here. No, like I like that film, but it felt like really fast. Like, would I be able to do a film like that one day? I don't know. What I'm saying is like somehow it has to have your personality, how you see things, how you feel things, right? And I guess I see them like that. I ask questions. Like my main question in the film, I guess it was, how could this be? How do we get to this idea where we can uh, make people um, like objects of exchange, right? And babies. That's the question for me. So that's how. So when she enters that clinic and we see that ceiling with holes, I thought, oh, this is the way we can ask this question. Like, how could this be, right? And she looks up and it's just weird. The place is strange because I feel like it's so strange. How could we do this? And like that, right? And I think the musician and the photographer are asking the same question all over and over again in the film. I thought, for example, when they become figures, like when they are coming down the mountain at night,
Yeah.
uh, that strobe thing, that was the I think that my favorite moment because that's when we were saying like, what does it mean to be invisible?
Mhm.
We were trying to design within the shot to express that question. What does it feel um, to be like a phantom, like no, but a society that doesn't see you um, or makes you a phantom? But we never came up with a good idea. But when we were there, we we couldn't see. It was too dark, and we didn't have generators. So we thought, oh, but if they go up, we can still see something. And then he said, yes, and if I make this film running 3 frames per second, it's gonna capture an image.
Mm.
And then we saw it, and it was our image that we were looking for.
Wow.
To speak about this invisibility.
Mm.
Um, and then Pauci, the composer, came in and brought her interpretation of um, that mix of electronics and violins and just crazy music that she brought. Um, and it did happen like that because I think the three of us were in the same um, mode of asking questions and looking for the poetic moments that would make the film not just be one impression, but to be to stay with you emotionally and bring you to a part of your memory, your fear, um, and something that anybody can connect with. Um, that fear and fragile, fragile moment, vulnerability. I guess.
It's a really interesting way of approaching the subject because you're right, the story is so outrageous. On the one hand, you could imagine it being told straight, if you like, in an almost documentary fashion. But I completely agree with you that stories like that provoke much bigger questions, and it's really satisfying to see an artist approach that with those broader philosophical questions in mind. That yes, this is a tragic story just as it is, but it does ask us much bigger questions about where we fit in society and how one lives knowing these things exist in the world.
Yeah, and also I try to make some connections about violence. That's why I decided the journalist was going to be gay, um, so that it's not only in the images but also in the script where we make the topic of violence and the denial of identity a bit broader,
Yeah.
so that he's not only witnessing the destruction of Georgina because of who she is for being indigenous, basically, and a woman, but also in his own skin, he feels what it is like that his identity is also destroyed, no, hidden
Mm.
on the inside, no. Uh, there is a connection, a society that crushes uh, people who are indigenous or gay or um, simply poor.
Yeah.
I really loved the scenes on the hill. And in fact, watching it a second time, I was kind of a bit disappointed because my memory was that the scenes had been a little bit longer and there'd been more of them, because there's something really important, I think. The first time I saw it, I didn't really understand exactly how that fitted into the story, if you like, but I loved it aesthetically and it felt significant. And watching it a second time, I really felt like it came together. There's definitely a metaphor in there, I think. And um, what I what and I guess this is another reason why it's important the film was in black and white, because one thing I really felt I saw yesterday a lot more was about the just how persistent and resilient the indigenous community is in keeping the culture going, because it is a little bit like Sisyphus just pushing the rock up the hill continuously and for a whole lifetime and just never really getting anywhere, just having to keep starting again. And that's definitely Georgina's life. I think that's what I really saw yesterday, that she gets no relief at all. At every point her life is kind of made meaningless, or really difficult. And it seems that that's really important to the film, that's what I took from it on the second viewing, that the in some ways that's why the not making too much of the drama of the prosecutions, and because actually the whole film is about through Georgina's perspective, really. And the fact that Georgina kind of represents that indigenous culture and just the toil of keeping the culture going. But what I mean, it's a long way of getting to the point of saying that I think what I really like about the film, understanding it a lot better after hearing you talk about it in interviews and watching it a second time, is that the culture is really precious and somehow it keeps going. I think it's really, it made more sense, the bits where they dance and play music, because they don't seem to get any joy out of playing the music or dancing, or there seems to be no joy in the film. And I guess if that was in color, it would look a lot more joyful. But somehow they keep the tradition going. And then there comes a point when a filmmaker comes along and kind of tells the story and celebrates the culture, I guess, and so it it felt really important that the black and white, the hill scene, in kind of pulling it all together, and that actually the thriller is secondary to what you were really trying to say.
Yeah, well, thinking about that, I definitely thought about it, because they were trying to sell from the very beginning the film as a thriller, and I thought, this is gonna feel like we're using this story to entertain. We can do that first, and then the culture. We also got that comment where they were saying, the film really begins when she gives birth. Why don't you start just there? It's gonna be more more of an impact on the plot point or whatever. It's gonna come earlier, and the film is gonna move faster. And so I thought, no, again, because we can. It's true that when the songs they sing and the dance, it's more mysterious than joyful, but still it's culture, it's beauty, and you can make the association that indigenous people are just tragic people without any other aspect in their life that just being the victims of something. So I thought, no, we have to see where they are. It has to be in order. Like they begin in a very bad place, but there is hope. There is tradition. There is culture. There's some moment of joy when they dance. If you remember, after the singing, even though the singing it's a sad song, but still they dance and they laugh a little bit, and then the beauty of the scissors dance. So yeah, that's why I insisted to put it there, not just to show how pretty it is, to show that they are not, the Andean is not a synonym, or the indigenous is not a synonym of tragedy or just tragedy. There's an attack on them, but their life was full of hope before. They are young, they were having a baby, they were together. There's a moment of tenderness, there's a moment of community. It's just a community that is starting. They are in that I didn't explain that in the film. Perhaps it would help. It would have helped, but I guess it's good to say now. They are immigrants in where they are is the hills in the coast actually. So they are coming from the Andes because for many reasons, but poverty is one. Like the peasants are in the worst position. Like there's no education in the rural areas, etc., etc. And then there was a war in the 80s. Actually, Leo in the end joins this terrorist group. I hate to call these groups terrorists, but they really earned that title, the Shining Path here. It wasn't like guerrillas, like we make a distinction from guerrilla groups that were perhaps very violent too, but they haven't earned that title of terrorist. Shining Path did. And that's the group that Leo ends up joining. But that's the group they were running away from, and the brutality of the military, of course. They were as cruel as Shining Path. So this whole thing started in the Andes of Peru, in a place called Ayacucho. It's a province in the south of Peru in the Andes. So peasants were between fires. They were accused by the military to be helping Shining Path. And they were accused from Shining Path to be helping the military. Right. Sometimes, and because they were forced sometimes to help any of the bands. So in most cases, they just had to migrate. Like in any war, people had to escape, and they came to the coast where it was a little bit more peaceful, and they just started a shack in the middle of the dunes. That's how, and thousands and thousands of people did that. This is where we start the film, is like the beginning. It's a shanty town that's starting, but then I would say in the end it's like more millions of people after a decade. Migration, right? So that's where they, on the other hand, it's they're running away from war. On the other hand, as usual, there's hope in the lives of immigrants, right? Like they are going to be access in the city, the more schools, maybe hospitals at some point, right? But they are in that moment where they just arrived. That's where we see Georgina and Leo in the very beginning, where they have that house in the middle of nowhere.
Mm.
And they have to walk all these hills and to get to take the bus to the city. That's a bit of the context. But then in the end, the sad thing is that Leo, the terrible thing is that Leo ends up joining Shining Path, right? And that means like he's losing his identity too. So I thought there is a resonance. There is. We are still talking about uh, identity because Leo in the end it's not gonna be Leo anymore. When you join these things, you obviously have to have fake documents, another name. So um, in a way, it's like Pedro's identity is also has to be hidden. Leo is gonna be hidden, and Georgina maybe too because she becomes at the end the wife of a terrorist.
Yeah.
Which means you can, it changes everything. Um, yeah, these people were followed for years. They are their life can't be the same. They're always the police is always an eye on you.
Mm.
The family of the terrorist.
I really appreciated that about the film because I knew nothing about Peruvian history before this, whereas I've learned something from it. And even what you've just explained now is really, really interesting. So thank you. Just a final question on, because I don't think, especially in lockdown, we wouldn't have seen this film if it wasn't for Mubi. How does it work that your film gets put on Mubi, and will it stay on there? I think today in the UK, today is the last day of its 30 days. But some films, they've now got a library where the film goes into the library. Not all films that they show, but will it still be on Mubi, or do you know?
I know it's in virtual theaters, but I don't know if it's gonna stay in movie or what's gonna happen. We went there because the sales agent tries to put it everywhere. And then we sold it to Netflix for Latin America. So then movie, it was available for other streaming platforms. And of course,
Right.
I wanted it to be in movie. So I was so happy when I saw, I knew it was going to be in some territories where there is no distribution in theaters. But I was surprised to see that because we have a distribution company in UK. But I was surprised to see that they were like working in tandem with movie, because usually it's one thing of the other or the other. Like if you don't have a distribution company is gonna put the film in theaters or to virtual theaters, then you have the streaming. But they were working together, so I thought, wow, fantastic. I don't know if it's gonna continue, but I know that I think it's already in iTunes and all those other platforms, Google Play, I think, virtual theaters. It was for a week in like 3 theaters in London, but then the lockdown came back.
It's a shame.
It is a shame. It is a shame.
Yeah, so sad. But the film is getting seen, so.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Well, one last thing, Melina, if you don't mind. Do you think sticking to your guns and taking on board all of these roles yourself this time and having it pay off as it has, the film seems to have been quite successful. Do you think that's given you more opportunities for the future to retain that level of control over your projects?
Yeah, you should keep both things, right? The control and more funding.
Yeah.
So yes, I am getting phone calls. Not that many phone calls, but I wish. But yes, people are interested to, especially from Europe, from France. It was I think a little bit successful everywhere, but in France more because it was at Cannes, so then a lot of co-production companies want to work with us for the next film. So yeah, that's good. And also in the US, there's interest for me to produce something there.
Well, whatever you end up doing, good luck to you.
Yeah, really
Thank you,
look forward
Joe.
to your next film.
Thank you, Cliff.